Elden Ring Nightreign's tunnels are low difficulty locations where you can find guaranteed smithing stones to upgrade your weapons. They also usually have a lot of low level loot, which makes them great if you're early in your expedition. There are up to 3 tunnels on the map, and they always have the same enemies and layout, so they're super consistent if you know what to expect. Hi everyone, my name's Diabetor, and today I'm going to tell you all about Elden Ring Nightreign's tunnels. So you might be wondering how I'm going to get one of my famous aerial views for a location that's underground, and my response is that I read the manual. If you go to your map, in the top right corner you'll see buttons that you can use to switch layers, and if you switch to the bottom layer, you'll be able to see the layouts of the different tunnels. So you can look at all 3 tunnels from wherever you are on the map. They're always in the same 3 locations. There's the northwest one, the northeast one, and the south one. We're going to start with the south tunnel. So the point of this video is for you to be able to quickly and efficiently hit these tunnels because time is really important in Nightreign. You only have, I think it's 11.5 minutes per day. So you want to be able to avoid unnecessary time wasters. So for example, in the south tunnel, you see I have a recommended path through it, which I'll show you when we get there. And then there's another area where there's nothing of interest. There's no reason to go there except for one very specific case, which I'll talk about in a second. And then each of the tunnels has a couple different chambers. And in one of the main chambers, there's always going to be a mini-boss that if you kill it will drop a loot sphere where you can get your smithing stone too. So in this case, that's the north chamber up there where there's always going to be a troll. And I also want to talk about using these tunnels as shortcuts when you're navigating across the map. So I'll also talk about that when we get there. So here's a pro tip. The tunnels can be kind of difficult to see because they kind of blend into the cliff face. So if you put a marker on the icon, that'll take you directly to the entrance of the tunnel and makes it a lot easier to see. So I'll talk about that for one of the specific tunnels in a second too. So in the south tunnel, when you enter into it, there's a big chamber here that has a wooden bridge that goes across to the side. This side path is where there's nothing of interest. That's the useless path. There's no loot. There's a couple enemies that aren't worth your time. It is useful as a shortcut, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the way you want to go in this tunnel, so again, that's the south tunnel, is you want to drop down and go into the north chamber here where there's a troll. You'll see I played Executor in this video because the troll is specifically weak to status effects such as bleed and frostbite, so having access to those is really nice and there's some stuff on screen that you can use for it. The mini-boss will drop a loot sphere, which gives you a guaranteed smithing stone too. Always take the smithing stone, it's pretty much never worth taking the weapon. There's also usually a treasure room in the tunnel, so in the south one, that's right next to the troll, you can get some common and uncommon weapons and consumables and some smithing stone 1s, which are good for upgrading things like your starting weapon, for example. So if you keep going through the tunnel, you'll come out to this big chamber here. There's nothing of interest here, there's no loot, these enemies aren't worth killing. The only reason you would come here is if you're going to use the tunnel as a shortcut, or if you were doing Wilder's first Remembrance quest, which requires you to kill a Crystallian that spawns here. And then once you come out the east side, there is a couple enemies here, like these bats. There's a scarab spawn, so make sure you check that. There's a boss spawn. There's a tree that you can take to get up to the northeast corner of the map. Now, if you're coming in from the east entrance, you don't want to go through the nothing of interest area, like I said, under most circumstances. There's the tunnel that leads to the troll chamber on the right side there. But if you want to use this tunnel as a shortcut instead of going over the cliff, then it's faster if you run through the nothing of interest area. So when you're routing out your expeditions, that's a good thing to keep in mind. So now we're going to look at the northwest tunnel. You can see here that its west entrance is elevated. It's like in the middle of the cliff face here. So there's a bunch of tombstones and stuff there that you can climb up to get up to it. Or if you're on top of the cliff, you can drop down to it, which I'll show in a second. So these tombstones lead you straight up to the tunnel. And then there's also more tombstones you can use to get on top of the cliff. If you're coming at it from the north side and you're on top of the cliff, you can place a marker on the tunnel icon, and that makes it really easy to just drop down to the platform where the tunnel entrance is. So that's another pro tip for you. The layout of this tunnel is really straightforward, so I didn't bother making a map for it. It's just a straight line. The boss is the Godric Knight that's in the main chamber here with the wooden bridge. Of the 3 bosses, this one's the hardest one because he's got a shield and he can do some decent damage. I like using things such as Frostbite to hit through his shield. You can, if you're Executor, you can easily deflect his attacks and then go for guard counters, and he'll stance break himself when you deflect. I'll put some things on screen. If you have something that does like shield chip, you can punch through his shield with something like Impaling Thrust or Piercing Fang. Fire pots you can use to knock him down when he's not blocking. Again, when you kill him, he'll drop a loot sphere that has a guaranteed smithing stone too. The weapon generally isn't worth taking, so pretty much always take the smithing stone too. This tunnel doesn't really have much loot. There's like a couple corpses and stuff, but they don't really drop anything very interesting. There's like 1 or 2 corpses in these side chambers here, for example. Again, not worth your time. It's better to just run through it, kill the knight, and then move on to the next location. When you come out of it, on the east side, you're in the ravine, so there's a boss spawn just to the south of you. There's an Everjail to the north. There's things like camps and stuff that can spawn on the east and on the west side. There's a bunch of boss spawns up there too, so you can take the spirit streams to get up to those. So try to work that stuff into the route you're taking. The tunnels are a great shortcut to get from point A to point B, where, you know, on one side of the tunnel, you enter in through it, and then when you come out, you've got like a boss and an Everjail and stuff like that. Try to keep that stuff in mind. And you can see, coming from the east side and going out the west side is a little bit slower because you gotta take the spirit springs up, so keep that in mind too. But when you come out, you've got things like a night boss can spawn on that field over there, or in this field over here. You can easily go out to the castle. There's usually a camp outside. There's a couple scarab spawns, so keep all that stuff in mind. Our third and final tunnel is going to be the northeast tunnel. Just to the north of it, there is a tree that gives you a 10% rune boost for a couple minutes, so make sure you hit that when you pass by it, especially if you're going to fight like the boss in the ravine or whatever. But yeah, so go to the entrance of the tunnel. This one has arguably the most complicated layout because there's a secret chamber. Unfortunately, it's useless, so there's generally no reason to go inside of it. You see that there is a boss in the form of a mad pumpkin head in the central chamber, and then on the east side of it, there is a treasure room that has a few corpses right in the middle of the ground, where you can find some decent loot as you're passing through it. If you come into this tunnel through the west side, then the first chamber you'll find is this one with all the scaffolding. So the way you want to go is the door that has the light on it there, and that takes you to the Mad Pumpkinhead chamber, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I want to point out real quick, on the left side, on this little cliff here, there's a tunnel that takes you to the secret chamber, and there's also a hole in the scaffolding here that also takes you down to the secret chamber, which I'll show in a second, but you basically never want to go there. But anyway, so in the main chamber, there is a Mad Pumpkinhead. He's usually doing his tantrum when you come in here, so it's good to have some kind of ranged weapon or something like that. Again, super weak to slash and status effects, just like the troll, so someone like Executor will shred him easily, and when you kill him, take the smithing stone too. You pretty much never want to take the weapon. I think there's like a corpse on top of the scaffolding up there, but it's really not worth the time of going and checking it out. But as you're passing through to the east entrance, there are these corpses here that can drop some decent loot, including smithing stones and stuff like that. So you definitely want to check those out as you're passing by. There's also a corpse on the outside of it. So like if I'm like running into the tunnel, I'll usually hit those corpses and let my teammates behind me loot them, you know, if I don't check them out myself. And then of course, once you come out to the east side, you got things like spots where churches can spawn. The spirit stream down in the ravine there is really useful to get up to the northeast corner there where there's like a night boss spawn. So, you know, keep in mind the layout of the area around the tunnel. Same thing, when you come in from the east side and go out the west, you gotta climb up the scaffolding, so it's a little bit slower than going from west to east, but not as slow as with the other tunnel. And then, so, I want to show off the secret area. You basically never want to go here, but I want to show it anyway, because then I can put that there's a secret in the title. So, if you're going into it, you want to drop down the hole. It'll be faster for a reason that I'll explain in a second. So when you drop down the hole, there's some scaffolding that has some bats and soldiers on it. You can kill them if you want for some runes, though they're not worth all that much. And then so it leads out into this big secret chamber, and it looks really cool. There's cool lighting, but there's no loot in here. There's a couple corpses that have, I think, a higher chance of dropping uncommon stuff, but I've never seen them drop any rares or anything, so really not worth checking out. There's like a couple soldiers or something. It's interesting that they included this big secret chamber, but unfortunately, there's just no practical reason to ever come here, because, you know, you just have so little time to work with. But yeah, so like I said, you want to go in through the hole in the ground so that you can come out through the tunnel there. If you went in through the tunnel, then to come out, you'd have to climb up through the scaffolding past all the bats and shit, and that takes forever to do, so you don't want to do that. But you also probably just never want to check out that secret chamber anyway, because there's nothing in it. But yeah. So I hope you found this helpful. Please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing because that all really helps me out. My name is Diabedor, and I will catch you later.